Edgar Allan Poe was the prime example of the starving artist. Most of his work was only acclaimed posthumously. It wasn't really like during his lifetime. So actually, he died broke, which I learned a few years ago, and like, that's really sad. But it's safe to say that he's one of the most recognizable names in literature for anyone. So it's surprising that there's really not too many adaptations of his work. I mean, there's a few. I've seen a few Vincent Price adaptations in the 70s, but beyond that, I can't really think of any that I've seen in the modern times at all. This leads me to the fall of the House of Usher. I haven't really done anything in a while. I haven't done too many reviews in a minute, but I just finished the whole series, and I have thoughts, and I don't know if I really want to annoy all my friends and family with my annoying thoughts, so that's why we're here. My name is What You Say, and this is Wit and Whimsy. The Fall of the House of Usher is a 8-part miniseries on Netflix. It is part of the Mike Flanagan Netflix deal, and it actually is the final entry in his Netflix deal. I will say this, just spoiler free. He went out with a bang. It's a really ambitious project. However, though, I don't think it quite hits the mark for me. Definitely not nearly as satisfying as his other projects, and I think unfortunately there was a lot of potential that just didn't get reached. If you like horror, I mean, I think you're gonna like this. It's definitely got that. The horror stuff is excellent. I was like actually legit pretty grossed out by some of it, which I mean it takes a lot. I watch a lot of gory shit, and it really takes a lot to unnerve me. I'm just really desensitized, so I mean it when I'm saying that this was pretty disgusting. I do think overall there's a lot of strong performances from all the actors in the cast. I thought everybody did a pretty good job from a technical standpoint. Everything looks great. It has that typical Flanagan look to it. He really knows how to do like night shots very well, which might sound like I'm just, trying to find praise because I don't have much praise to give, but I think that that's a very hard thing to do, actually. And I see a lot of directors really screw up night shots, and it's really crucial for especially the horror genre to do that right, and he does. Overall, though, I think I'll get into why in the spoiler full review, but I think that, yeah, this definitely needed to be a longer series. I really wish that this was more of like a 4-season show than just a mini series. And it's surprising that I say that because I am a big proponent of the mini series format. I think oftentimes so many shows would have benefited from being a mini series, or so many movies would have benefited from being a mini series, like the Marvel's Eternals, which had all these characters. I feel like that could have been a show or a mini series. But I digress. I just think it's another example of production's, season order kind of getting ahead of the script. It's like saying, hey, make this 8 parts, even though it maybe should be a little bit longer. And I'll get into why when I talk about spoilers. If you like past Flanagan work, you're probably going to like this. A lot of the recurring cast members he does in his anthologies are in this, obviously. And then some newcomers. I don't think Bruce Greenwood was in any of them, but he's the lead in this one. He does an excellent job acting. It's fun. It's good. It'll get you in the spooky mood, but I only can really give it probably like a 7 out of 10, maybe even a 6.5. And let's get into why. So I did read The Fall of the House of Usher, and I was like kind of interested when I heard that they were making a show out of it, because I was just like, it's only like 5 or 6 pages long. I don't remember, but I know it's not a very long short story at all. And so it's interesting that they were going to make a whole season of TV about it. I don't know if I agree with that choice, especially after watching the whole thing. It's, I was kind of expecting, I guess, for them to pad the story or to just make up their own story that kind of just adds on to the little bit that Poe had written. And I mean, I guess this kind of does that, but I think the biggest issue with this is that it feels like more of a creative writing exercise than it does a fully realized vision. It's such an interesting premise. I think the first episode I was kind of like, ooh, I can't wait to see where this goes. And it just really abandoned it like right away. It seems like the whole show is focused on basically just murdering all of Roderick's children. You learn up front because he's attending a funeral for three of his kids, and you learn that his other three had passed the week before. So all six of his children die in the pilot. They're already dead, I should say, in the pilot. And I think this approach can work sometimes. They kind of flash forward, but it only really works if, maybe when we see how they die, there's going to be some more insight as to how it frames the story, or how it pushes the story forward, or how it maybe, I don't know, benefits someone's character arc. I don't feel like any of the deaths, and I really mean, like, I tried to, like, I don't know, justify why they happen, and I can't think of a good reason why any of the deaths actually push the plot forward, or do anything to reveal anything. And I think that's just kind of odd. It's an odd choice to make this a miniseries. After about the second death, and I was like, oh, so this is the pattern we're following here. We're just gonna do a different episode, and a different child of Roderick's dies in each episode, and it doesn't really accomplish much except killing them off. It doesn't really do anything to actually progress their character arcs forward. I think like that was the worst part about it, is that they kind of fall flat because of the nature of the fact that there's only a couple episodes to establish most of them. Some of them, I mean, especially Prospero, who's the first to die. I mean, he barely gets any screen time at all, right? And I feel like most of the characters actually barely get any screen time before they're just killed, And there's some like small examples of who they are, like the one Tammy girl is a cuck. All right, interesting, but it doesn't really like do enough to flesh out her arc at all. If any of these characters have an arc, I think this was the most frustrating part, is that this really is just about Roderick, but there's this whole ensemble cast that feels wasted. And I say wasted because I really was invested in the first episode. I was kind of like thinking the show was going to be horror Succession. And I can tell that Flanagan watched Succession before he wrote this, because this feels like they're quipping at each other like the Roys would be. It feels very much like Succession. They're like a wealthy family of shitty people that want an inheritance, and then I think it had a really great setup. You have these kind of like selfish, self-centered characters, and you find out that one of them is an informant, and now they're like pitting against each other. And I really thought that was gonna be the premise of the show, but it really had nothing to do with that. The informant was more just like, I don't know. I think that's what Flanagan was really going for too. I think he really wanted to make it seem like the informant was tearing this family apart, or like the idea of the informant, because the informant, we find out it's not even real. I thought that was an okay twist, but I just feel like, I really wish they had done more with that. I really wish that the rest of the show would have been the deaths really being caused by, each other, like the paranoia, the infighting. And to some degree, maybe that was happening, like Camille gets killed by Victorine's chimpanzee that she's testing. But for the most part, all the deaths are kind of just, they're brought about by the Raven character, who, or Verna, Carla Gugino, whoever she's playing. I think it's clearly a stand-in for death. They make a deal with death, basically. We find out much later that Roderick sacrifices the whole bloodline to attain wealth, which, again, that twist isn't bad at all. But I think, like, the way it happens, especially, like, after watching just episode and episode of all the kids getting eviscerated, they don't, in an individual level, inform the plot at all. You could have done that with just one or two of those characters. That's the thing that really gets me, is that you could have taken a few of those off the board, and it would have had the same outcome because Roderick surrendered his whole bloodline, right? So it really is just like killing them off because we have to kill them off, and there's 6 of them because there has to be 8 episodes, right? Like when I start to think about the episode structure, when I'm starting to think about it like a producer would, that's a bad sign. I should just be in it, you know? Like I should just be in the series, watching it happen, watching it unfold. And so I really wish that I don't know. And I know this is like a Netflix thing. If you watch a lot of their miniseries and even a lot of their shows, a lot of times they do this where it's an 8 episode season. And I really wish that they would just consider trying some other formats. And I know it's not all the shows. I know some of them, like Orange is the New Black and House of Cards, used to be what, like 13, right? But I think the new thing now with Netflix is that it's 8 episodes. It's like always 8 episodes. And it's just a perfect example of why I don't think that approach always works. And I think if Flanagan had done this as a movie instead, or as a longer TV series, which I think I would have preferred. You know, it could have been a movie if they cut down some of the characters, and it could have been a longer TV show, which I think would have been the better route if you had this like 3 or 4 seasons. I think that would have been a much better approach, you know, like actually let these characters kind of change and develop, like the kids, because there's potential for all of them, I think, to have a really interesting arc, and then you kill them off along the way, you know, like maybe some of them die like kind of mid-season, some die in the season finale, but it really would have made it a lot more satisfying, and I think they could have actually fleshed out a lot more of that infighting that I was hoping the show was going to be about. I was really hoping this was going to be like Succession. And it felt a lot like Succession, and I don't want everything to be Succession, but I'm just saying it, like that was clearly like what Flanagan was watching at the time. I mean, it's clearly influenced, it's in the dialogue, and I kind of wish that they would have had more of that development and infighting, and that would have been the cause of all their deaths, you know, because then you would have actually had a reason to show them, because it doesn't really matter like how any of them die. I think that's the worst part. Like it's cool in like a horror way, and I will say like a lot of the deaths were like gruesome. I was like kind of shocked, especially by Prosperos, because like, you know, I've read like Mask of the Red Death. I haven't even read all these stories that this is based off, but it's different in the show. I mean, it's actually, I think, way more intense in the show, but at the same time it's almost like only like a surface level inspiration from the Mask of the Red Death story. And I feel like all these are kind of like that. Like I looked at the plot of the Goldbug one, and it's not even anything near what happens to Tammy. Like the story is completely different. They're like looking for like buried treasure and shit. So I think it's almost just like very surface level inspiration for, you know, these stories. I think the closest one that I could tell was probably, you know, the Mask of the Red Death. But even then, I mean, that's talking about scarlet fever, right? It's not talking about acid rain. And it is interesting because, you know, like all the deaths are also kind of in a way caused by Fortunato's influence, you know, the drug company's influence, but then not all of them are, but all of them are directed by the Raven character. I think that's really what gets me. So my point is, you know, they all die simply because of what's revealed in the last episode, but their deaths don't mean anything like on an individual level. I think the issue of them only being like a couple episodes, I really had a hard time feeling the impact of all their deaths too, because of that, you know? Like I knew one of them was gonna die each episode, and basically because of like the titles of some of them, like Telltale Heart, I was like, oh, I know that's gonna be Victorine because she was working on the heart monitor thing, right? So a lot of the suspense kind of got pulled out of it, but more than that, like I just didn't care. And I think that was the worst part. I just didn't care when they would die. I would be like, well, it's going to be a good horror element, but I wouldn't miss these characters because I didn't have enough time to get attached to them in the first place. So I talked a lot about the writing. I think that was a big issue, not only structurally. A typical Flanagan issue that I have with his stuff is and a lot of writers, I think, fall into this trap, unfortunately. Writing dialogue, I think, is very, very difficult. It's something that I think I've struggled with when I write stuff myself. But it's very easy to fall into a trap of sameness. It's really, really easy to write your characters sounding all the same. And I really noticed that in this series. Like there were some legit laugh out loud funny lines. I was like I can't quote them right now, but I remember watching it and thinking that was funny as hell. But the worst part was it just felt like it could have come from any of the children, right? The thing about, like, Roman's quips in Succession. Why do I keep talking about Succession? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I feel like there's too much similarity not to mention it. The thing about having characters that are all smart like that, you can't have all their quips be the same brand. You got to find a way to make them, all unique and quippy, but they can't all be sounding the same. Because if it all sounds like it's just one omniscient voice, it's not going to feel like real fleshed out characters. I mean, just another issue I think with uh, the show being as short as it is too. A show like Parks and Rec, I think, was one where the characters really improved over time. And same with like Schitt's Creek. I know they're comedies, so it's a little bit different, but the writing of those characters I think only got better because the characters themselves only had more time to grow and form. And I think sometimes like the reception, audience reception, or the writer's reception, maybe they watch it back and they think, oh, we need to flesh stuff out. Like, Andy Dwyer became so much better in season 2 of Parks and Rec. And I think the same could have been said for this show. I feel like, maybe if Flanagan had more seasons and more time to really introduce us to who these characters are, they might have been better. But yeah, unfortunately that like omniscient writing voice, it kind of just rules this thing. Overall, I think this one it's like solid and it was fine. It was a good, fun Halloween watch, and I have to admit that even though I knew what was gonna happen every episode, I couldn't stop watching this show. I think from just like a technical standpoint, I wanted to watch it because it looks really good. I have to say that is one of my favorite things that Mike Flanagan does is the way his films and TV look. They are really good. I really have to admit that they look awesome. He really knows how to make stuff look creepy, and I like that. But man, it's a big missed opportunity for me. I feel like there's just a ton of potential here that got wasted, unfortunately. So, yeah, not much we can do about it now. That's the last of his Netflix deal. So, I'm still looking forward to seeing what he does next in his career. I think now, especially getting away from Netflix, maybe he'll get away from the shackles of the 8-episode, crunch that he had to do on this show. Maybe he'll actually have a little more freedom. And but I mean, if you're a fan of his work, definitely check it out. Yeah, I'd probably stick with this probably being about maximum of 7 out of 10. And I think that's all from like the technical aspects of the show and the acting. The acting was really good. I really gotta to get that out again. I thought the whole cast was like really into this, which I think helped a lot. I think if they didn't have as good of a cast, the show would not be as good as it is. But he really knows how to get like the ensembles together, and this was like his greatest hits of performances. I feel like all the people that worked with him in the past, they all came in. They did a really good job. So I gotta say hats off to the cast all around. They were really good. But I just, man, it comes down to the writer's room. What really makes or breaks a good show, and I think this one, unfortunately, just had too many wrong decisions, and it had potential to be a lot better. But yeah, I'm gonna say a 6.5, 7 out of 10. Give it a watch, see what you think, and I'll see you guys next time.